News. Jillian Ludwig's parents are now speaking after the two-day hearing for Shaquille Taylor's competency. So let's listen in.
Assault shooting. Taylor would not have been on the streets and Jillian would still be alive. There were many examples of missteps in these evaluations by the Vanderbilt team, not the least of which was the minimal amount of time dedicated to producing them and the lack of evidence that the team acquired before pronouncing Taylor incompetent. When confronted with any inconsistencies, they simply misremembered. I could go on and on about all the problems in the defense's case, but the bottom line here is that we are hoping and praying that Taylor is found competent and this case goes to trial so that Jillian can get the justice she deserves. She was just 18 and she was so talented and ambitious. She had a beautiful, kind, and giving soul, and she had such a bright future ahead of her. We must now live with a life sentence, and so should he. That's all.
Could we ask you a couple questions, if you don't mind? I'm Jennifer Krause from Channel 5. I can't imagine what you were going through in there and having to watch the surveillance video and the interview video with him. Can you tell us, first of all, was this the first time you saw the surveillance video? And as a parent, I can't imagine.
It was the first time, but I will say neither of us watched the part that showed our daughter because that would be too painful. We had our heads down.
And the part where he was interviewed by police and the Detective Joe asked him, he told him, that it was the bullet that you fired that hit the young woman. And then he said, "What would you like to say to the family?" And he said, "It was an accident." What did you take from that?
Even if it was an accident, if you're shooting a gun in a public place, your intent is to kill someone. And he shot a gun in public in the middle of the afternoon into a park where there could be children playing. There's a playground there. There's a jogging trail. My daughter was taking a jog in the middle of the afternoon. So I don't believe that it was an accident. He shot a gun to take a life and he took a life.
My name's Dryden. I'm with Channel 4. Tell me a little bit about sitting there just feet from him for 2 days. What was that like?
It was really, really hard. I was doing deep breaths the whole time. In much of my seat yesterday, the computer was blocking my view of him, and I feel like maybe that was divine intervention, so I didn't have to see him. I saw him today. A couple times we made eye contact, and it was, I don't know, as hard as you can imagine.
Surreal.
Can you give us maybe one, there's a couple things that stick out in my mind of his interaction with the psychologist, and what are a couple things that stick out in your mind that lead you to believe, that was testified, that he is competent?
He just was able to have clear interactions with everybody. I mean, he's, in all other respects of his life, he seems to lead a normal life. He has a job, he drives a car, he has, a girlfriend and an apartment, and it's some of the examples they gave. For example, when they gave him the hypotheticals and they said, "What would you do if you found a letter on the ground?" And he said, if I knew the address, I'd put it in their mailbox. If I didn't know the address, I'd leave it there. And they found that problematic. That's what I would do. Isn't that what anyone would do? And then if there's a gas leak in your house, what would you do? And he said, I would leave the house and I would call 911. Isn't that what anyone would do? So he was completely rational, in my opinion, in many things. Maybe he's a slow learner, but that's what your lawyers are there to assist you with.
And the video showed him using the terminology, that demonstrates that he understands or he can understand. That we're seeing it firsthand from him in video, having these conversations, using these terms, reasoning. It was obvious to me.
Talking about, I can't be charged for this, I can be charged for that. That's the definition of competency, is understanding how the legal system will affect you. He knew it. It's just really unfair, and I just pray that the judge comes to the right decision.
He talked about he has a lot to consider here. How hard of a decision do you think he really has here?
think it's easy.
There's a lot of information for him, obviously, to consider, but yeah, I agree. The decision's clear.
The judge also kind of made some very pointed comments towards the end of this hearing where he talked about there's a lot of blame to go around. He kind of, this was when Detective Riggs was on the stand, and he was asking why the police department had not arrested Taylor earlier and taken him off the streets for the shooting just a couple months earlier. And he was asking the DA, have you talked to the...
Okay, so you've been listening to
about
Jillian Ludwig's parents responding to reporter questions. They've just walked out of the courtroom. This is after 2 days of competency hearings for Shaquille Taylor, the man who's accused of killing Belmont student Jillian Ludwig. It was 19 months ago, and you can tell from the parents' emotional reaction, it doesn't get any easier. The mother's saying, I could go on and on about the problems, examples of missteps by what she says the Vanderbilt psychological team who was doing the evaluations. You can be sure we'll have this in its entirety on WSMV.com. So what happens if Taylor is declared incompetent to stand trial? Because at this point, it's in the judge's hands. In Tennessee, usually the person's committed to a mental health facility for treatment. The court closely monitors that person's progress and then can offer extensions if there's a chance the treatment's allowing the individual to regain competency. Now, if treatment isn't successful and the person is deemed unrestorable, that's the term, the criminal case could be suspended indefinitely. If treatment is successful, the criminal proceedings will resume and the individual will eventually face trial, which we heard from Jillian Ludwig's parents. That's what they want to see.